We're starting our event now. My name is Olga Khometa. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Slavic Literatures and Languages at the University of Toronto, and I will be moderating our meeting with the Ukrainian authors today. This event is sponsored by the Petro Yatsik Program for the Study of Ukraine and co-sponsored by the Center of European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies and the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures at the University of Toronto. Since the beginning of Russia's war in Ukraine, the Yatsik program has held almost 50 webinars on various topics related to the war. You can watch the recordings of the previous webinars on the CERES YouTube channel. This webinar is dedicated to the voices of the Ukrainian poets who are so strong that they continue to write during Russia's war and terror in their home, Ukraine. Through their poetry, they reflect on the catastrophic events that have been happening to their homeland since February 24, 2022, for almost the whole year now. Some of our guest authors have been displaced and work in exile. The others stayed in Ukraine and keep working under continuous shelling in the circumstances of a humanitarian catastrophe with daily power outages and reduced heat and water supply in their homes. They document the war experiences of their people and themselves in a unique way, lyrical, metaphoric, and psychological. Their poetry creates the language to express the most tragic experiences that one can think of and to reflect on the shock, the suffering, the loss, and love. Their poetry is an endeavor to make sense of the nonsensical and to cope with the unceasing traumas of this war. Their poetry invites us to face the unforgivable. And ultimately, their poetry is a powerful manifestation of the Ukrainian resistance through the war. It is my great honor to introduce our panelists today, Julia Musakovska, Iya Kiva, Alexander Averbuch, Darina Gladun, and Oksana Maximchuk. Our guest authors will be reading their works taking turns. I will be posting the links to each poet's translations in the chat here so that our audience has a chance to further explore their works. And after the reading, we're having a Q&A session and the discussion of the poetry that we are going to hear now. The first speaker today is Julia Musakovska. She is an award-winning poet and a translator based in Lviv and a member of Pan-Ukraine. She is the author of 5 poetry collections in Ukrainian, most recently The God of Freedom, and a bilingual collection, Iron, in Ukrainian and in Polish. Her individual poems have been translated into over 25 languages and published internationally, recently appearing in Agni, the Springhouse Journal, Tupelo Quarterly, Red Letters, and the Epiphany magazine. Julia translated a Swedish poet, Thomas Tranströmer, to Ukrainian and translates Ukrainian contemporary poetry into English. She keeps her daily job at IT in the executive role while being active in the cultural field, participating in numerous literary events abroad during 2022. Julia, the mic is yours now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm honored to be here today. And before I start reading, I would like to touch upon one issue that is now trending and often being forced upon Ukrainians in the context of Russia's war. It is the pressure to find a way to forgive the unforgivable and to make peace with the aggressor. So the war has been destroying Ukrainian cities, villages, Ukrainian lives, but also destroying the very comfortable status quo for the world. Especially for those who have been doing business with Russia, consuming Russian culture, much of which is not even Russian, but a cultural appropriation, often of Ukrainian legacy, like Gogol, Malevich, and many more. And also being charmed by Russian mysterious, in brackets, souls. Most of our all-tolerant world, always searching for the good in people, still cannot believe in the existence of the absolute evil. The Russian propaganda of fraternity nations is being repeated, which has proven to be, by the history, to be a complete and utter lie, used as a pretext for occupation. And as to any negotiation and peace treaties, we know what treaties with Russia are worth. The monster will use this time to gain forces and come back to bite off even more. It is obvious we cannot contemplate forgiveness while we are being killed. When Russian soldiers are in this very moment murdering our fellow men, women, and children, committing war crimes, atrocities like rape, torture, and mutilation, forceful deportation. You can think of forgiving someone who has seized their actions, paid for their crimes, and shown remorse. And we have seen none of that from the Russian side. Millions have left Russia for safer places, or rather more comfortable countries not affected by sanctions or mobilization. But we don't see them protesting against Russia's actions in Ukraine. Moreover, they rejoice when civilian neighborhoods are bombed and Ukrainians are killed, as with the recent attack on the residential block in Dnipro, when Russian telegram channels were full of joy. They ask their relatives serving in the Russian military to not show any mercy, and they share their government's imperialistic ambition to the fullest. It is evident that this is not Putin's war, but Russia's war. So how can we contemplate forgiveness in such circumstances? This is a shocking suggestion. We are now trying to survive and resist the enemy. This is our main focus. I think that the main reason that we as poets are writing now is to testify, to speak the truth about what is happening and helping ourselves and probably our readers to cope with the events of this war. The war for our existence that we must win. I'd like to start my reading with a poem I wrote back in March last year, which is included into my bilingual collection Iron that was mentioned in the introduction. This poem has been translated into English by Professor Timothy Snyder. He recited and discussed it in his Yale course, The Making of Modern Ukraine. I took a liberty of replacing one word in this translation to make it closer to the original. Such problematic, such frightful poems, full of anger, so politically incorrect. No beauty in these poems, no aesthetic at all. The metaphors withered and fell to pieces before they could bloom. The metaphors buried in children's playgrounds under hastily raised crosses, frozen in unnatural poses by the gates of houses covered in dust. They prepared meals over an open fire. They did try to survive. It was of dehydration that they perished under the rubble. Shot in a car under a white flag made from a sheet. With colorful backpacks over their shoulder, they lie on the asphalt, face down, next to their cats and dogs. I'm sorry to say so, but such verses are all we have for you today. Dear ladies and gentlemen, spectators of the theater of war. And another one from last spring. Its title in the English version is Hold. Every message of death, a ruined life, a destroyed home, is like a hole punched in your body, quickly patched with metal. Soon there will be no place left to cover. A tin man, an infernal android, a perfect machine, a steady shell filled with pain and rage. There is no deadlier weapon, no more powerful mechanism. There is no more dangerous enemy. Hush, my heart. Shut up. Be still. It's not the time. The next one was also written in March last year after a Russian missile attack on Lviv, my home city, when it was discovered that visiting foreign reporters were doing the forbidden filming of the explosions to publish in the media, which could lead to further attacks. So this is called The Body of My Homeland. They've been looking at the naked, ravaged body of my homeland, taking and posting photos and videos in high resolution. They were shocked and judgmental, concerned and tongue-clicking, cheering and supporting her loudly, surprised she is still alive, impressed by her courage and resilience. They offered her food and drink, wet wipes, a bed to sleep in, a work permit, all of this free of charge, while a mad dog was ripping bloody pieces of meat from her body, an inch from the carotid. The entire crowd of fully armed people gathered, but no one dared to pull the trigger, not to be shaken by recoil. The next poem was written after the news about the liberation of Kyiv region, Bucha, Irpin, and Borodyanka, and discovery of horrible mass murders there committed by Russian occupiers. So in English, it's called Bundle of Grief. I'm carrying my bundle of grief in a crowded street. My grief is crying, strained, and the passers-by are annoyed. Console your grief. Stop this lamenting. Cover it to make it warm, feed it and rock it to sleep. Grief is grief. Everyone has it. My grief is pressing its burning forehead against my chest. In its eyes, thousands of us massacred here and now. Keep crying, my grief. Cry. Stones and nails. Magnolia is blooming in someone else's garden. I feel like dying, but I must speak up. With a mouth full of stones and nails, a mouth full of blood, saying the words for those whose souls were removed from their bodies. How do you know what they wanted to say? Speak, poet. Speak though you have no right. The moment it becomes unbearable, just spit out blood through stones and nails and continue to speak. The heart, a squashed apple, is falling apart. Flowers are proudly open to the spring sun. The shamelessness of nature, the shame of survivors. Sharp stones of words in the dried out mouth. And the last one for today is translated into English by poets and translators Iia Kiva and Oksana Jennings. This poem has also been translated into other languages, including Polish, Lithuanian, Italian, Arabic, and Maltese. Who said that words have no value now? Our words that are being written in the air with the incandescent iron of breath that strike like clotted blood on pale lips, are cutting into the soil under our feet, settling on our clothes and shoes like dust from ruined homes. Our words are stretching to those dear to us, to everyone who is scattered around the country's map with bullet holes in it. Words like the strong connecting wires attached to the heart along the tight ropes of blessing together. How much we can love as one, how much we can hate. The words we put into backpack just before leaving, the words we grab to maintain who knows what kind of balance when the ground is kicked out from under our feet like an unsteady stool. The words we press to a gaping wound, the torn, tender belly of the teenage girl. Safety. Our words, hard and swollen with rage, black from grief, like the concrete covering of an ancient bomb shelter. There is nothing more durable, nothing less fleeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yulia, for your powerful poetry. Our next speaker is Iya Kiva. She's a poet, a translator, a journalist, and a member of PAN Ukraine. Iya was born in Donetsk, where she lived until Russia's invasion in the Ukraine's east. In 2014, she was displaced to Kyiv. Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war in February 2022, Iya was displaced again and now resides in Lviv. She is an author of the two collections of poetry, Father from Heaven and The First Page of Winter, as well as a book of interviews with Belarusian writers entitled We Will Wake Up Different, Conversations with Contemporary Belarusian Authors about the Past, the Present, and the Future of Belarus. Her poetry has been translated into more than 30 languages. Her poetry was published in separate books into Bulgarian, a poetry book entitled Witness of Namelessness from 2022, and into Polish, entitled The Black Roses of Time, same year, 2022. Iya is a recipient of a God Polonia Fellowship, the Dartmouth College Writer Support Program, Documenting Ukraine Program, and others. Iya will be leaving earlier today because she has to be at the presentation of her book poetry, Witness of Namelessness, in translation, in Bulgarian translation. Iya, mic is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for Yulia for her words, because I agree, I fully agree with her words, and I only want to add that that war, Russian full-scale war, especially, don't destroy only our buildings, our cities, our lives. It destroys our feeling of normality, our opportunity to feel happiness, and it will have very bad ecological situation in future. And I start. My apologize. English is not my active working language, for mistakes maybe. Refugees theater. Sorry. I will read poems in translation of my friend Evgenia Kanisheva. She is a translator and a refugee from Crimea. Refugee theater. The first night in the safe place. This is what we call the west of the country. You are lying on the theater floor like props. For the war, you can watch too free in all the eyes at once of the animals, frightened to death. You still have time to buy a ticket in the first row of the Third World War, wrote a well-known Western journalist on the eve of the floods. The stage light falls well, so the world can notice dirt under your nails and your too long hair, not good since Poland, that crackles with Jewish family branches when the chuck of good puts a cross on it. You have no manicure, have not done it for 8 years. So when you are reading, this one is for the woman from Bucha. Will they teach at school about this photo in someone's cherry orchard on well-groomed fingers? You ask the red color if it's ashamed of this comparison. But we, like the daffodils sought by old women on tram stops, from now on will never feel shame of being or not being. The bitter bulbs of the trees that grow by the roadsides of history. Well, in a couple of days you will walk down the avenue of freedom, not a metaphor, to drop all your prophetic dreams on the floor of the barbershop. But this will not save you, for memory, like a madman with a razor of longing in his hand, is leading you along a dusty field full of dead potatoes. And so long is this field that you see dirt instead of eyes in children's faces. But for now, you are lying on the theater floor like props and shuddering at the jingling of trams, these civil singers in the chore of military aviation, and you cannot take wax out of the ears of the modern music lovers. Refugees railway station. A long way home, when there is no home anymore. Its lane tracks of breeze through the station of Lviv. People with the faces of dead are looking at empty lives, like last year's snowmen at the first flowers of war. Tears in their eyes are like dried glue, the experience that can be turned out only with the eyes, to be replaced with the black apple trees of time, growing on the dusty paths of their hands. Rain is greeting the outcasts with the postcards from the family albums, where war is sitting on all of the chairs at once, smiling with the gaping bullet of Hamas to the butt of this, as if to the joke that the others just cannot tell well enough. The world looks at the photo captions again and again. Mariupol, Hostomel, Irpin, Borodyanka, Chernihiv, Bucha, this Cyrillic music hangs in the ear like a long fire, which gets stuck under the nails as dirty water of shame. Death, just you dare to take a step and we will eat you for dinner. The rusty tints of our lives are no match for your teeth. Death, just you dare to take a step and you will stay on this table, like a shabby tray covered with three people's hair. People are walking through the puddles, for there is no other way but to take their own defeat like a loaf of bread at a train station. Into this bread, the volunteers have put the keys to the future, in case we have enough strength to look into the eyes of love. War is a great defeat of culture. With other words, the book covers whisper, but the rusty grass of crimes grows in their mouths, and the amber of silence gathers its army behind the cheeks. We hammer evidence like nails into the hands and feet of children, like a night talk that no one can later remember. Take a closer look. The ash from the piece of paper where it's called meeting come. The next poem called Apples. If you remember, massive attack to the Dnipro was on Malanka, 14th January, and one of the symbols of this great tragedy was a yellow kitchen where on the table was yellow apples. Dinner with apples, they thought, but it is this with apples. A group portrait of death and apples, with all the people eaten by death. The place where grandpa's tree was growing, don't say it was an apple tree, has become an apple stuck in the throat. Seeds of scream are cropping the January sky, like a carol anthem, for there's no one to sing it. And the apple trees in the Garden of Eden, all cut down by this. So, overgrown in the wild rose in the city, that in the dark you cannot tell it from a danger. You touch the tenderness softly, the blood pierces the throat, feeling at your feet like a heartbeat broidered with pain, like a shadow of shadows that subtly prick out your eyes. The roses' songs fall down like snowy flowers and stiffen in the little red pots of wildness, like roughs, our daily bread on the pallet. That's how screaming becomes a craft, and poetry becomes a carpenter, a bush becomes a tree, and its branch become the barbed wire hooks, and all of them are catching at the ear, like a bird's wing catches at the edge of freedom. They are clinging to the mother's breast of the winter sky, as if they didn't want to acknowledge this transformation, like the children of love from the lost paradise. Meanwhile, the white rose keeps telling its story. And I think it will be last poem. Do you think about rain when you come out of the forest of your body, like the darkness comes out from under the fingernail of the full moon? Do you notice yourself wrapped in the warm rags of winter amidst the landscape that does not belong to you? Do you want to appropriate this air as bitter as your walnut youth and as light as a lonely swing of the wind? Do you see the bag of the fog between the mountains, as perfect as curved ne'er yet touched by an artist's gaze? Can you tell about it without opening your mouth, but feeling in every slit in time with screaming? Do you make any peepholes in the screaming when building your scream house with huge oral cavity? Do you feel a twinkle of love when you look at the mirror, shaking all the possessive pronouns of the flower of your skin? Do you turn on the peace radio while counting steps of hope? Do you feel alive in the punctuation of life? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Iya. Our third guest author is Oleksandr Averbuch. He is a poet, a translator, and a literary historian. He was born in Novoaydar, Luhanska Oblast, Ukraine, and is currently based in Edmonton at a position of Isaac Walton Killam Memorial Postdoctoral Fellow at the University of Alberta. Oleksandr holds a PhD in Slavic and Jewish Studies from the University of Toronto. He is the author of 3 books of poetry and an array of literary translations between Hebrew, Ukrainian, English, and Russian. His latest book, Zhidivsky Korol, The Jewish King, was published in 2021 and is currently shortlisted for the Shevchenko National Prize, that is a top literary award in Ukraine. Oleksandr has organized numerous poetic performances and festivals, such as the International Festival of Contemporary Ukrainian Poetry in 2020, and edited a major section of an issue of Ukrainian Literature at Journal of Translations. He is active in promoting Ukrainian-Jewish relations and is currently working on an anthology of contemporary Ukrainian poetry in Hebrew translations. Alex, please, mic is yours.
Thank you, Ola, for your kind introduction, and many thanks to the Petro Jacek Center for European and Eurasian Studies, to the Slavic Department of the University of Toronto, to Olha Kesarchuk, to Arba for organizing this important event, and thank you for attending this reading. I will read 3 poems, first 2 translated by Oksana Maximchuk and Max Rosochinsky, to whom I'm immensely grateful, and the third one will be in my own translation. So the first one was published in the latest issue of the Manhattan Review, and it is called "How Do You Return to a Town Which Does Not Exist?" How do you return to a town which does not exist? To a home? How to return when it no longer exists, like a heavy sorrow? Streets with changed names, swollen vessels that can't find an estuary. And you stand in this, flood up to your throat, getting mixed up, how to open the door for it, with a key on a string that you'd lost, sleepily fumbling under your shirt. You can find it now in this whirl, in the ribbons of damp fabric, paper, layered tightly as a rock strata, where even a landslide would not expose the interior of a mountain. Finally, to go in, turn on the light, and still not see the fogged up faces. Turn it off without noticing how you've aged, daring to ask at last, how did I die? Thick, fragrant smoke encircles pampered memory. And you lie down in bed to wake up as a 35-year-old. In that house, feeling around the bed, you get lost, looking for space amidst the sullen ancestors, until you are told, with a sudden falling of soil, on the wrinkled, contorted face, get ready, get ready. And not yet realizing that it isn't addressed to you, you ask, my beloveds, and where am I to go now? Where does one say goodbye to oneself these days? And the second poem is entitled, I Want You to Remember. I want you to remember, so that in the fever of your holy daydreaming, you would see everyone at once, dressed in body, strung on dry bone, how you led the worms into the womb, how the roots of the frenzied trees tore at the swollen ones, how you bound hands with wire like on the Day of Atonement. In your sleepless holiness, I want you to hear to the very end of your being this bewildered, unbearable scream. Want you to see how you raised luscious grass in the fragile chest instead of the hardened heart. How you fed the eyes to the mass graves. You've erred again for the stubborn lips sewn to the gravestone grown. Lost their will to pray to your wilting attention. You've erred yet again, having thrown onto the cellar floor the wrong people in the wrong place. You have erred time and again when the voice stained with white rust of your trial swallowed the last words. How do you rest now and in all eternity when you hear us call your name? Do you hear? Sky can no longer bear your yearning, torn to pieces of human despondency. What do you see from your throne of your indifference? And also tell how to pray to your weariness from now on. And the last poem reflects on the last week's missile strike on the children's ward of the district hospital in Novaidar, my native village in Ukraine. The rocket hit and completely destroyed the children's ward where Russian soldiers had been hiding and receiving treatment. And the poem responds to one of the many multitude of disasters taking place in my homeland, currently occupied by Russia, and to the invaders' cynical use of the children's ward as a hiding place. It is called Russian Soldiers Are Resting. Російські солдати спочивають. Russian soldiers are resting on cots in the children's ward of the Novaidar hospital. Chubby giant mutants wrapped in the diapers of my childhood, Russian soldiers with their tarpaulin boots break the boundaries of our too narrow cradles. They stretch, they open their mouths, they ask for kasha day and night, day and night. They suck oil from baby bottles and ferret out natural gas. Far from Kostroma and Ryazan, Russian soldiers cry out in their sleep, Matushka, Batyushka, God save the Tsar, wide is my motherland, victory, we are one people, oil, gas, ballet. Disheveled, headless, armless, like the broken dolls my aunts had that I used to play with as a child. The Russian soldiers are at a loss. We'll play with them now. We'll put a sweater on them, pull a skirt on them, sew back the torn off head, screw the hands and legs into the empty body. Scattered throughout the labyrinth of the children's ward of the Novaidar hospital, so endless and dark, so Soviet, so mine. That's where my great-grandmother, Rahila, a big, deaf, red-haired woman, brought me in September 1985 for a secret circumcision. That's where I pissed on the face of the doctor, who had never seen such a wee-wee. In the labyrinths of the children's ward of the Novaidar hospital, there are stands with big syringes, tongue clamps, enemas, forceps, icons of Lenin and Kravchuk, and some toothless boy. I prayed to all three to keep me safe from cavities and did not eat sweets until I was 12. Big and dark as the church of the Moscow Patriarchate, the children's ward of the children's hospital in the children's Novaidar had 2 children's floors. On the first, bending your tiny body in half and pulling down your pants, they scraped you for pinworms. On the second, on a glass as cold, so cold and transparent as childhood memories, they squeezed out from your little finger drops of blood. And now, on cots of the children's ward of the Novaidar hospital, with a stale reek of liberation on their breath, and under the wreckage of imperial solicitousness, Russian soldiers went to their rest. And no toothless boy was killed, say the locals, who saw in the children's word of my kingdom peace and dark night, transparent as treason, as a jet of pea in the eyes, as the spit of God's dew, as the slobbery kiss of your neighbors, like an obstacle course for those blinded by rage and longing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you for sharing your latest poem. Our next presenter is Darina Gladun. She's a Ukrainian poet, translator, artist, and a researcher from Bucha. She's the author of 3 poetry collections in Ukrainian: To Chop the Tree, From the Shadow of Handsome Red Boys, and Radio War. Darina is a co-author of children's book about prominent Ukrainian women, She Also Made It. She is a co-translator of Velzhina Mort's book of poetry, Epidemic of Roses, 2 anthologies of Belarusian literature, and selected works of Louis Gluck and Morel Smith. She has been a curator of performance school at Creative Youth Seminar in Irpin since 2017, and a participant of Performance Studies International since 2020. She is the author of a wide range of solo and group performances, such as Stand Up for the National Anthem of Ukraine, Performance Ended Yesterday, Performance Will Start Tomorrow. Darina is a laureate of numerous literary contests and a recipient of fellowships from the President of Ukraine, the International Writers and Translators House, the House of Europe, Staromiejski House of Culture, the Potsdam University, the Institute of Human Sciences in Austria, and Leslie Center. Darina lived in Bucha until the beginning of March 2022. She currently resides in Vermont and is doing MELS program at Dartmouth College. She's organizing a series of Ukrainian events at the Dartmouth College. She works as a junior researcher at the Theory of Literature Department of Taras Shevchenko Institute of Literature of the National Academy of Science of Ukraine. Darina, the mic is yours now.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your kind words, and thank you for having me here today. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for Ukrainian community to be united and to see solidarity from different world institutions, and to have these events that show that Ukraine gets this support, like goes on getting the support on multiple levels, and cultural level is one of them. So despite all the horrors of war, I'm pleased to be here. I am grateful for the event and for constant support of Ukraine shown by your institution. I'm going to read poems both translated into English and written in English. The first poem I'm going to read is called The Ambassadors of War. It was translated by Tatiana Bonch. We wrap ourselves in a blanket of war. We are on a military diet. War for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. War pours out of our eyes, wears out the soles of our heavy boots, gets in small pieces under our skin and starts to fester. We bear the war in our heads, we bear the war in our mouths, on foot, in trucks, in cars, in buses, between cities and suburban trains, across the borders of large and small settlements, across the state borders. Radio broadcasts are exclusively about war, war. Now turn on your TV, war, war. We fill waiting rooms, other people's houses, phone calls, roads with war. We retell what we saw, heard, and the news from the front, trying to speak the war out, squeeze the war up, wash the war out of ourselves. But the war leaves none of our bodies. Words do not stop in the depths of our throats. The next poem is called Night 48. When the war has only just started, we counted it in days. So Night 48 is the 48th night of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. I wear a second-hand country, a second-hand city, apartment, bed, pillow, blanket, ability to walk across the park without checking under my feet, without checking over my shoulder. But Poland is not safe, Lithuania is not safe, Germany is not safe. I wake up from loud conversations behind the wall, fuzz, jostling, banging of doors. I think, there we go. The war is here too. I roll over. I try to fall asleep knowing that Moldova is not safe, Romania is not safe, Estonia is not safe. Every night now I see the same dream. In the dream, I go to work in the morning, I return in the afternoon, I wash dishes, I wash clothes, I cook dinner, I read books, I go to bed. And even in this dream, Latvia is not safe, Georgia is not safe, Finland is not safe. To help myself fall asleep, I do simple exercises. I imagine two solid walls between myself and the window. I imagine myself behind a heavy metal door in front of which stands an oak armor. I double check my food supplies, my drinking water, and the contents of my emergency bag because Slovakia is not safe, France is not safe, Italy is not safe. Having not found any safe areas on the map, I wait for the war to end in the second-hand time. This poem was translated by Valjana Morp and published in Liberty's literary magazine. Since I came to the US, I've started getting the experience of a different kind. I'm immersed into English speaking context, and the experience I have, I'm not sure if that's going to be valuable for Ukrainian audience. And actually, to be honest, I don't have words like in Ukrainian for that, because Ukraine is at war, and I feel that anything I say about my nowadays experience in the US will sound too fake in Ukrainian. That's why I've started writing texts in English. The first one is called Peace Noun. Peace, noun. Pronunciation, treaty. General use. 1. Children of army depots schooled at bomb shelters misspelling word peace in essays about their dreams. Therefore, I have to make peace into peace and at least once a month for almost a decade. 2. Year by year, month by month, day by day, every minute, every second of war seems endless, makes peace less and less plausible. 3. There are two major questions regarding peace teachers of humanities have to struggle with in military depots. Question 1. How to protect children who have never seen peace from an outdated concept they have learned from books once the treaty is signed. Question 2. How to protect our own memories of peace from the retouch of despair. When the peace was announced, I could almost appreciate nice spring weather, flowery grass, and hills on my way to school. But I could feel Sharp fragments of war where the clothes was touching my skin till the last of my days. Moonless night over Appalachian Trail. Tiny hawk arrives at sundering falls. Scratchy trees stop breathing their bloom when I start thinking of war. A moment ago I got a call from home. Bombshellings at night look blossoming, said my mother. Adamant sky swallows anxious thoughts provoked by my mother's call. Withered leaves find hawk and gets even darker. And the last poem I'm going to read today was provoked by the English dictionary I was reading, where I found out that one of the adjectives used for the description of the hydrogen bomb is sophisticated. So the poem is called one of the adjectives used in the description of the hydrogen bomb is sophisticated. Elegant still surface, and the content of it is the end of the world. Like the content of an empty shell is in an ocean. If you could put it to your ear, what would you hear?
Darina, thank you. I suppose that was the end of your reading. Thank you so much. And our final presenter today is Oksana Maximchuk. She's a bilingual Ukrainian-American poet, scholar, and a literary translator. Her poetry appeared in Agni, the Irish Times, the Paris Review, the Poetry Review, and other journals. In the Ukrainian, she's the author of poetry collections Ksenia and Love. With Max Rosochinsky, she co-edited the anthology Words for War, New Poems from Ukraine, an award-winning anthology of contemporary poetry. Oksana won first place in the Richmond Lattimore and Joseph Brodsky Stefan Spender translation competition, and was awarded a National Endowment for the Arts Translation Fellowship. She is the co-translator of Apricots of Donbass by Iia Kiva and The Voices of Baben Yar by Mariana Kijanovska. Oksana holds a PhD in philosophy from Northwestern University, and she and her family are displaced since the beginning of the war and currently reside in Warsaw, Poland. Oksana, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much for having us and for hosting the event. And thank you everybody for coming and joining us for this discussion. So I guess I wanted to give a little introduction to our engagement with war poetry. My husband, Max Rosochinsky, is a Slavic scholar, and he is from Crimea. So when Crimea was occupied, his mother was actually visiting us, and it was this very sensitive issue because we were trying to determine in 2014 what his family is going to do, if they have to pack and leave everything, or if they're going to stay through the war in Crimea, if there is going to be a war at all, or it's just going to be occupation. So as we were dealing with all of this uncertainty, we started putting together an anthology that was published in 2017. And it is a collection that features 16 of the poets who started working on this processing of the war experience since the very early days. And I know the poets present here have been doing it too. So it's my great shame that the anthology came out in just those 3 years, and it's not more expensive, not more inclusive. But fortunately, in the recent year, there are a lot of other anthologies that are forthcoming, collecting this new war poetry. In particular, I know that there is one that's forthcoming with Arrowsmith Press that's edited by Iia Kiva and Caroline Forchet, and it includes the works of, I think, many of the poets that are present at this reading. And there is also an anthology that's called Voices of Freedom that similarly offers this wide scope of more recent poetic writing about the war. Another book I wanted to show is this translation of Iia Maximchuk that we have done. It's her book, Apricots of Donbass, and Luba is once again one of those poets that has started, that has gained a lot of visibility working on war poetry, and in part because she is herself affected. Her family is from this tiny village in the Donbass, and a very blue-collar working class family, and she found it very difficult to persuade them to leave as the city was getting shelled and destroyed. And a lot of the poems in this volume are actually about negotiating this boundary about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, what can be tolerated, as Yulia was saying in her opening remarks, and what is beyond the pale of tolerance, and what it says about us when we are willing to put up with so much. Is it just is it a moral flaw to be perhaps too forgiving of things that are not easily forgiven, and where forgiveness has to be earned and perhaps isn't? So I will be reading a couple of poems that I wrote in English. I started writing war poems in Ukrainian very early on, and then I figured that it's too close to me. It's too difficult, too intimate. And I found that because English is not my native language, I've lived in the US since 1997, and I keep going back and forth between the US and Ukraine. But because it's not my mother tongue, I have much more distance from my own experiences when I use it. And so I can generate this very different type of poetry that takes a more removed perspective on these events and doesn't even necessarily speak from the perspective of the we, which I think is one of the interesting features of war poetry, because it so often involves undergoing these collective disruptive experiences. So I'll read from this little portfolio in the PN review, and I think Arba is going to post comment with the link, so that if you prefer to follow along on the screen or just take a look at the poems after the reading, then you could do that. Water under the bridge. No more bridge now, but the river flows as it did before, like a single tear rolls down the face of the landscape. Tears through the terrain laid out for it by another tear and another before it. Doesn't grieve when the towns clustered atop its banks lie in ruins. Doesn't weep cradling the corpses, toying with the remains. Indiscriminate like a poem's flow, reflecting everything, changing nothing. Stolen time. Trapped in a plan of another's making, we are squandering time, awaiting the war. Perfectly formed evenings of navigating between the dark silhouettes of trees against the purple snow. Weekend afternoons of urgent lovemaking, voices seeping through the half-drawn curtains, adorned by shadows of migratory birds, jubilant and remote, citizens of a world shared in shards. Non-gentle reminder. When my fluttering heart takes off its awkward perch within my ribcage, let me at least remind you to button up your coat and put on the red hat I got online to help identify you in the current of the crowd in case the enemy strikes by air, by land, by water. Rocket in the room. What the rocket has in common with a room full of children is its current location. Somebody thought the rocket belongs in the room with children, and now it's here. In time, someone else will come and collect the pieces of the rocket and of the children, weeping and shouting insults at the sky. But for now, this rocket and these children are an unsorted matter, a puzzle, awaiting a solution. Rose. It can't happen to me until it does. The trajectories meet on point. Terror comes off layer by layer. Glowing inside the cellar, supple serrated petals pushing against the war. Here it is, the rose. I'm dancing here. And the final poem I'll read is called The Kingdom of Ants. In the brief intermission between the world wars, we somehow managed to weave a language out of the things we felt mattered for our future as an impermanent species. Barely even words, but collections of signals from distant planes of existence, patterns expressive of a communion between roots and surfaces, sprawling networks of fungi, projectiles of spores, shooting out like smart, self-navigating missiles, propagating a form of rebirth that would touch us all, impartially, indiscriminately. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oksana, and thank you all panelists for your very important work and for coming here today to share your work with our very impressive audience today. Now I'd like to open the floor for the Q&A session. And while we are waiting questions from the audience in the chat here, please type your questions here. I also would like to know that Iya Kiva, who already left because she has a like overlapping another event going on now, you can follow the link that now has been just posted to see Iya's published works in English. And I would like to open this discussion with a question that has been already touched upon by some of you. What is the poetry? What is the role and the function of poetry since the beginning of the war? How the role of the poetry changed for you in your life since that event that changed so much in our lives? I wonder who would like to start answering this.
May
Yes, Darina, go ahead.
I see key functions of poetry during the times of war as preserving and accumulating the new experience within literature. Poetry has it is rather like short form of literature where we can put our experience in relatively short amount of time, so we don't need to have a lot of space for that. We don't have to spend long hours, long days writing a novel that will be written about the war. Once there are going to be no blackouts, once people will settle down, probably once the war is over. But right now, poetry is marking the milestones of how the war is developing, of what events are happening and how we see them right now. Because when we think of the great novels about the war, they are written post-war. they reconsider war experience, and something may be lost in that. While poetry, which right now works like through social media a lot, like Ukrainian poetry is shared with the world through social media. It's mostly translated into different languages because and thanks to social media. So it's very fast in terms of reaching the audience all over the world. In terms of reaching the translators, we don't have to wait for publications. So we don't have to wait for some acknowledgement, editorial work, etc. So we share the knowledge, we share our experience in literary forms, and that's the other function of poetry. So first one was the third one is to develop the vocabulary, develop language Ukrainian people speak of the war. I feel there used to be a huge vortex at the place where there should have been the proper dialogue of the World War II experience in Soviet Union and in post-Soviet countries. I'm doing my own research, and some of the narratives that my great-grandparents were not willing to tell earlier, before the full-scale invasion, those narratives emerge. And my great-grandparents compare their childhood during World War II to the childhood of nowadays Ukrainian children. So it's also an option for them to reconsider their own experience.
Thank you, Darina. It's a great answer, very insightful. Yuliu, Oksana, would you like to add anything about the role of poetry and how it's been changed since the Russia's full-scale invasion? And if you would like to add anything to Darina's comment.
I will add about the role of a tool to comprehend the change, because this war has brought about a drastic change for the entire world, for our understanding of things. And poetry is, as Darina mentioned, a very quick reaction to things. It's a great way to quickly react. And it has become that sort of the tool. Also, it's not the poetry that we used to write before, even since the start of the Russian occupation of the eastern regions and of Crimea. When I compare my poems written during that time, even if I have started writing about that war pretty early after it began, it's still a different language than the last year's poems. And when I think about this widely quoted saying of Adorno that writing poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric, it doesn't mean that the poetry will not have place after the war has started, but it means that it will be a completely different kind of poetry. We will be using different approaches, and also this poetry has become very austere, very laconic, and it's also like most of this is documentary poems. There's a lot of that in the space, and of course social media is helping to make it public, and it is very important that we have such platforms that help us spread the information and share that emotion that poetry helps us express.
Yes, very true. Thank you so much. And I would like to add from myself that poetry is a way to think through the unthinkable, to find the way to name something that everyone experiences, but it is extremely difficult to put to name, to put it in words, because it's like so shocking, so new. It makes people speechless. But the poetry finds the language. It's a breakthrough from numbness and speechlessness as the cause of the shock, and shock mainly. So it's indeed about figuring out the language to express most difficult experiences that one can think of. And I would like to read now a few questions from our audience. First one is from Saskia Laufer, and it goes to everyone who has translated works here. How and why does the meaning of your work change when translated into English? So yeah, it's about the relationship between the original text and the translation. How does the meaning of your work change when translated into English?
May I jump in on that?
Darina, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm grateful to my translators, but I know that the Ukrainian and English language just function in different ways. They have very different the translations. I was feeling the gaps where what I was like where my intentions were raised or overwritten. And at places I was feeling that in the translations, the translators made it enriched the meanings of what I've initially written. So I guess something is lost, but something new is formed in the translation. I don't like to read the translations myself. So I appreciate when someone else does that, because I don't know if you can say this, like if you know that, notice that all of the voices of the poets change once you shift the language. So my voice in Ukrainian sounds lower. It has like, it's very different from how I speak in English. And I feel when I'm reading the translations of my poems that they're alienated from me 2 times. The first time during the translation and the second time when I'm reading that. So I'm very glad that there are so many languages in the world I don't know. So I can just be grateful to the translator and don't struggle with all that is lost and found in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Darina. Yulia, would you like to add anything?
I will add from my translative perspective, because currently we have been working on the project of translating my most recent book into English together with a wonderful poet from New York, Olena Jennings. And here I act as a co-translator of my own poetry. It's a very weird role, I would say. It's you have to distance yourself from your own poetry and try to rediscover it in the other language, of course, because poetry for me is rediscovering your text, the messages you're conveying, the metaphors, everything in the language of translation. Yeah, it is very tricky, and what I found is important to transfer the context. Sometimes you cannot find the context in the language of translation. You have to look for alternatives. Sometimes you have to add more explanation. Of course, poetry is a completely different substance than prose, and you cannot just put in more words. You have to keep the form. and it becomes really challenging. But without those things, we would be left with a long list of footnotes with that poem to explain all kind of things. And it's interesting how it can be naturally inserted into the poem while translating. So it's quite an endeavor, and I can feel how this poem is becoming something else in translation. But it is very important to just distance yourself, to treat it as just a translator project. And from the author's point of view, of course, I can make sure that certain things, complicated nuances, are conveyed correctly. But I'm actually not sure I would do another book that I have written as a co-translator, because it is a challenging experience. When I translate other poets, I translate some of Ukrainian poets, those that are not widely translated and not so popular, but those that I feel are very valuable. It is very exciting game, I would say, to rediscover this poem. But it's good not to have any emotional attachment as to your own text.
This is very interesting. Yes, Oksana, I really would like to hear from you about the translations of your work. And also, there is one more question for you from Linda Cook McDonald. I have been able to purchase this book, Words for War, and it is truly a gift. You mentioned another anthology you're working on. So when will that volume be published, and how available will it be in the United States?
Thank you. I will first answer the question about translation, because I have a lot of experience translating other people's work. And I think there is a lot of misconceptions about what translation does. So in my view, translating a poem is like growing a twin inside your own body that you're giving birth to. And so it's very offensive to a translator when the poet begins to correct this work, because it doesn't belong to them anymore. It's what Yulia was mentioning in her response, right? That it's very painful for the author to let go, but once they have consented to having this work cloned or copied, they have to give permission for the translator to exercise their own creative freedom with respect to that work and make their own choices. And quite often, I think it's this clinging or the gravity of the original that threatens to ruin the work in translation. It really must be resisted because the contexts are so different. The traditions are different. The sonic texture in the poem will feel very different depending on what language you use. So the translator really has to call the shots about what to do. And the piece that she or he is creating is not subsidiary to the original. It's not subservient to the original. It's its own autonomous work of art and should be given the space and liberty to breathe and function as such. So I think often we think of translation as something that's like, you know, taking an object and putting it in a different place. But in fact, it's a much more organic, demanding process. And even if the works are dissimilar you know, they still share some kind of DNA that makes them connected. So I think clinging to identity is a wrong approach here. For the anthology, there is one that I've contributed to, or two or three, but the one that I most recently just checked the edits on has gone into print last Friday, and it's edited by Iia Kiva and Caroline Forchet. Caroline Forchet has been working on this witness poetry for decades, and she has put at least 3 different anthologies that bring witness poetry from all over the world together under a single cover. And Iia Kiva, of course, is a very prominent American poet hailing from Odessa, and his book, The Deaf Republic, has received many accolades, and it also treats the subject of violence that the state or the group of individuals can exercise against the vulnerable. So in many ways, they also have this really good ear and sense of what to select and put together. And that anthology is going to be available all over the US from a small press called Aerosmith, and it's founded by the founding editor of Agni, which is a preeminent US journal of poetry, Askod Melnichuk, who is an amazing author, novelist in his own right, and has worked on the subject of World War II and Holodomor in the Ukrainian diasporic communities in the US. So he himself is a Ukrainian speaker by heritage, but his first language, his mother tongue and the language in which he works is English. And he is working through this inherited trauma that Darina was also mentioning in her comment, that has been passed on through multiple generations and is now resurfacing anew, being triggered by these past events of the past 8 years for some, or of the past year for many more others, because at this point, everybody has been affected very violently by this war.
Thank you, Oksana, for your very well thought through answers, and someone was very impressed with your metaphors of what translation is actually. That covers many concepts about translation, poetry translations. And I would like to read the last question from our audience for today. It's from Danilo Leshtishin. After writing your own poetry about the human cost of war, have you discovered that your interpretations of previous war poetry, both from Ukraine and other regions, changed? And if so, in what ways have your interpretations changed? So, does this war change our interpretation of our attitude of the war experiences in other regions, and specifically in poetry?
If I may.
Go ahead, Darina.
I would say it's not solely about the war, but about the experience we gained. So for many Ukrainian writers, this war is the first in a lifetime experience, first-hand experience. Therefore, now, like personally, I understand so much more of what is meant by certain metaphors, or what is meant by the existence of war in all the spheres of your life, even when the war is at this slow phase, when it's kind of not there, but it's there all the time in the background, and you have to coexist with the war in the room or the war in the country for for a long time. And moreover, this spring, when I was thinking of Guernica, I just like looked at the picture in my phone, and I was like, but that's clear. Like it's not surreal. Like it's not surreal anymore for me, because before the full-scale invasion, I was thinking of the experience of others as like sort of a horror fairy tale. Like I have no doubt that they meant something by it, but what did they mean? I don't know. I have no idea. I literally had no idea. And now, unfortunately, I have this experience of sleeping in the bed like 10 kilometers from the front line. I have the experience of in the hotspot of war. So I have this experience, and I just know. I know that Guernica is not something about like some distant past. No, I know that's about every single city in the world which was bombed and in which civilians died. Discovered in Bucha, we discovered like this human remains. That's what we saw in Mariupol. We saw that on our screens. So in a way, I have just got this notion that it happened with humankind throughout the history. It's nothing new. It's just that I didn't understand that till I saw it for myself.
Darina, thank you very much. It's time now to wrap up, and I would like to thank the authors again for coming here today and making it work, even though your power schedule in Ukraine is very tight these days. I would like to thank again the Petro Jacek program for study of Ukraine that made this event possible, and the co-sponsor, the Center of European, Russian and Eurasian Studies and the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures at the University of Toronto. And I invite the audience to check the links to today's guest authors' publications online that we posted here in the chat, and also to check the Sarah's events on Ukraine that will be happening this month and further. Again, thank you very much. It's been an honor and a great pleasure to meet and hear your poetry today. Bye.